Coming to you from the world of AV control and programming, along with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, how's it going today? And I'm glad to be back for another great show.
Yeah, Steve, I'm glad to be back. I'm doing good. And yourself?
Doing well. I think that there's a lot going on in the world of AV, and this is a time of year when people are kind of ramping up to figure out what summer projects are looking like, and there's certainly a number of different options happening in control and programming. With that, we wanted to talk today about how we might approach different types of systems, from looking at the one-off type systems that are maybe your unique boardroom or a conference room that requires a control room, or big auditorium or performance center, versus more of your routine type systems, which I would say are kind of standardized systems. You program them once and you stamp out a lot of them. Each one of those, I think, can be approached differently, and there's different things to think about when you're programming one versus the other. I'll pass that over to you in terms of some of your experiences, and then we can kind of dive into maybe some tips that we could provide.
Yeah. So as our listeners should know by now, if they don't already, work in higher education. That's something I do. We have these one-off systems, but I would say probably 90 to 99% of our ones are very cookie cutter, almost to say, our general classroom types. Like I said, you have those one-offs here and there, but we're more of a, all the rooms are the same. Especially in our environment, we are very pro collaboration. So unlike some other schools where you might have a science building and then you have a math building, in our area, you might have a classroom that's science, and the very next one next to it is math, and the one next to that is arts. Allows the faculty members to interact with each other, collaborate, allows the students to, mingle among each other as well. But that means that all our classrooms need to support all our faculty needs. So it's not like I'm throwing in high contract projectors in our arts room and, detailed document cameras in our science building. It's same across the board. The real good benefit of that is simplicity of our users can come in knowing no matter what room they're going into, all the equipment's the same, all the controls are the same, and the feel and the user experience. Because us AV people, we love experience. Our user experience about the same no matter what room they go into.
I think that's a really good point. I know that one of the keywords, at least that I learned early on, especially in the higher ed environment, but it also exists in the corporate environment, is consistency, and that the controls and the operation and the experience needs to be similar from system to system and room to room, because the users don't really care what we have going on behind the scenes. And I think that that's the magic that control and programming provides. The one thing that I would mention about when you have the types of standardized or typical or cookie cutter systems, as you mentioned, they could get unruly because you always have that one little thing that's different between a room. Maybe it's an IP address, maybe it's a lighting setting, maybe it's the naming of buttons, or maybe it's one room has shades and the other one doesn't. And there are different programming techniques that at least we have found to help to manage that, so that you don't end up with a bunch of the same or very, very similar programs floating around, because that to me is where you start to get yourself in trouble from a programming standpoint and a maintenance standpoint.
Yeah, I do agree with there. We've actually had that issue a couple times. I know you and I talked about maybe doing an episode just on this, and going between programming and configuration is when I first came in, with me being the in-house programmer, I was really tasked with the custom programming. So the more the one-offs, the more advanced rooms, while our other AV guy was tasked with the general classrooms because we were using more configuration based instead of custom code, which worked, but they acted differently because there was a limitation to the configuration system. Like I said, we're going to save that for another topic per episode, but I really think that was key. And like you said, keeping it consistent, that no matter who goes in the room, it's the same. But there are hard times to do that. Like, for example, we were very big on this one control pad for all our classrooms from the manufacturer. All our rooms had it. The manufacturer decided to discontinue that product because they were going to a newer, more different design, different options that really was above the need, what we needed for. So we had to go and start looking for another control pad to give us the same feel and user experience. But again, it's not 100%. So it is a little different, but it's not a huge new learning curve for one, our technicians, and two, our users.
So when you're talking about something like that, is that something that you would include within the same code, or do you think, or is that something that needs to be spun off to be its own code? I guess it depends on if this is going to be, say, the new generation solution versus the old generation. But one of the things that we've played with is to make code so that it can be configurable within the code to allow you to enable and disable different components, let's say. So you might need to support a 10-inch panel and a 6-inch panel or something similar within the same code, or have situations where you may need to have a different display in different rooms without spinning off different variations of the same code.
So yeah, I'll admit we're a little, I'll use this term, spoiled in our environment here, is we have strongly standardized on things. So we've gone with all our displays are from the same manufacturer, or our projectors. So we have one module that can control all of them. So it doesn't matter if I'm throwing the newest model in, the controls are the same. All I have to do is make sure the IP address is set the same. We moved away from touch panels. I mean, personally, I like touch panels, and we went with keypads instead. They're cheaper, they're simplified. It's easier to keep the buttons, the labels the same. But like I said, if we have to change a button label, I can't do it remotely. Got to physically go there to do it. But again, also touch panels are more expensive. But having that consistent equipment-wise, we haven't really had to go in and say, all right, we need to support, an Epson projector, a Sony projector, a Panasonic projector, and depending on the room, because no matter what room we're going in, it's the same manufacturer. Same with our keypads. So my codes are a little more, they seem like more one-off rooms, but they work in all our rooms. All I have to do is go, okay, I'm using this IP address for the projector, or I'm doing this button press. That's really it.
Which I think is a really good point too, because you can control your environment. So being that you have say over what's designed and specified, and have more input into what that solution looks like, you have the ability to limit the number of variables. If in the for the remainder of this discussion, if we switch over to these single, like, highly customized bespoke systems, we see a lot less of them. And but they're but the fact is that those don't have those same type of restrictions where you're not where you have to cater to the masses. So you're catering to one particular audience or one user type. Maybe it's uh, a CEO's boardroom that they're going to use, or maybe it's a large auditorium that is going to be operated by somebody who's hired to run that room and needs specific functions. So the approach taken there is a lot different than your standardized classrooms. And I think that there's more that there's more opportunities to provide higher end features and functions. But then on the flip side, how do you manage that so it doesn't get to be unruly?
Yeah, those projects are definitely fun. I actually enjoyed doing those projects more than our cookie cutters, because it allows you to flex your programming muscle, as I was said. But to me, it almost feels those projects are never done, because you're always finding, well, what if I do this in this space? Or can I do this here? It gives you that creativity, but you're not boxed in too much. So you almost have to go, okay, I got to stop developing and stop playing with this code because it's working. But yeah, they're fun. I've done a couple of event spaces, but our main goal, and I think this should be any main goal of programmers, especially for your UI, is you should have a very simple design for your basic users. We always say that the way our control systems work is anyone coming off the street should be able to use it with little to no training. They should be able to walk in and go, okay, this is turn it on. This is pick up whatever source I'm using without calling us or having us just show them what to do. So even our event spaces at the podium, it is a very simple UI. Like our one room, we have 2 projectors for the room. So at the podium control for the users, they can turn on the system, which turns on both projectors, routes the video to both projectors. Now, if they want more flexibility, more advanced, they're more likely going to be employing our production team anyway, because then you get more microphones, more all this other stuff that our production team will be handling. So in those environments, our production team has a tech panel that allows them to route different sources, a different projector. They can turn one on, one off. They have the more flexibility, and that's where we provide our training to that team member.
But one of the things that I'll point out too, and I think that that's a really good point, the usability is always an ultimate goal. No matter how much you know the system, you still have to be able to operate the system, and the right controls have to be in the right places. And especially in situations where you may be working with a live speaker, let's say, or doing some type of a production environment, having access to controls quickly and easily is super critical. The thing I'll point out, and I think this is probably a good takeaway from this discussion is that both of these approaches, they still do require a degree of discipline and planning, because like you said, you don't want to get caught going down too many rabbit holes when even if you are doing something that's highly customized, because you start to have to worry about more gotchas and how you're adding features and how they may impact other things. So I think, and what I've found in the past, is that programmers need to have that big picture view, whether they're looking at one highly customized system, and plan it out in advance. I feel sitting down and writing code is not the way to start a project, but more so plan that project and make sure that you even develop a scope for yourself if you're not given one. And the same is true for cookie cutter systems, because you have to think about what are the different variations from room to room, or what are the variables that have to be taken into consideration, and how can I make this so that it's most manageable. Because when you're making changes, and we always do, those can really magnify when you're having to change a lot of one-off systems.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes you just got to set that scope, even if it's internal, and stop playing around with the code on those one-offs. And the cookie cutters, you just make sure you can do I aim for 99%, but even 90% that you're working rooms that you could be putting in, you should be good.
I think that's a good way for us to wrap this one up. I know that we want to mention to our audience that there's many ways that they can reach us. So one way that we started with is YouTube, but now we're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and reach out to us directly. So James, how can people get in touch with you, and what are some ways that we'll be looking for feedback from our listeners?
Again, easiest way is on Twitter, AV_James King, LinkedIn, James King, or like I said, the higheredav.com website where I write a monthly article.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms. And also we'll try to find other avenues so that you can give us feedback. We're going to be posting a poll that will be looking for input, and maybe doing some voting on some topics coming up. And we want to try to keep this fun and interactive and make sure that we're hitting the mark. So please help us to help you. And we want to make this into something that continues to be a lot of value. So that's what we have today. And this has been Ask the Programmer.